Review Board for Burlington, January 5th. It's a Zoom meeting, and we take up items that they are on the agenda. And when we call each item, we'll ask the applicant and anybody else who wants to speak to raise a hand, or somehow Scott will identify them so they could be asked to join the meeting. And we also ask that people provide Scott with the a mailing address. Is that right, Scott? Not an email, you want a mailing address.
We have the applicant's mailing address, but if any members of the public want to speak, we just need the mailing address for notice.
Okay. Good. When we, on the public hearing items, we will swear people in, and that includes the applicant and any member of the public that intends to speak on that particular item. So then the first item on the agenda is the agenda. We have no changes, right?
Correct.
Okay. Communications, there's nothing additional that wasn't posted online.
I posted some revised sketch plans for King Street, but had let you guys know that.
Okay. Minutes. There are no minutes posted right now.
The minutes are posted with the prior meetings, but we're making progress, Brad.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch up. Okay, so then the first item is the consent agenda, and the first item on the consent agenda is 45 Lakeside Avenue. And it's a request for a time extension. Is the applicant here? I see John Kahlo is here. Is that?
Yep. So John, you're live if you care to talk.
Yep.
So I will just ask John, are you okay with the conditions of approval that were recommended?
Yeah, I don't think there's any change to the original. Basically, we've been granted a 1-year extension.
Yeah.
That's fine. And we've just, if any, for those who may be interested, you know, it looks, we've got a temporary certificate of occupancy for building 50, and building 44 is completely occupied. You know, we'll be out of there in the spring. So you know, we appreciate you know, the extension, just given the impact of the COVID.
Well, let me just ask, is any member of the board object to treating this as a consent agenda item?
I'm sorry?
I'm asking the board if anybody objects to treating it as a consent agenda. No.
I'm losing you.
And is there any member of the public here to wants to speak on this item?
If you wish to speak, raise your hand. And Brad, I don't see any hands up.
Okay, since the board's okay with this, can I have a motion from somebody on the board for this item?
Sure. I'll move on item ZP 190202CA MA 4450 Lakeside Avenue, that we grant the 1-year time extension and adopt staff findings.
Second on this. Brooks, okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Raise your hand, say aye. Opposed? None. Okay. John, you're approved for the 1-year extension.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is 266 College Street. That also is a time extension request for the renovation of the existing Y building. Is that applicant here?
Yep.
I think you're this one as well, right, John?
Correct.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
So the fact that you just stayed around, that's just intentional. Okay. This also is, and I guess the extension is working because there was a 3-month extension from COVID in addition, which makes this timely. And are you okay on this one with the conditions of approval? John?
Yes, and just so I understand, with a 1-year extension, it brings us out to, I believe it's August 2023. Is that right, Mary?
That is correct. This time extension differs from the Lakeside Avenue because Lakeside is nearly complete and you needed the time extension just to complete the project. This
Right.
is a time extension to allow you the 1 year to commence construction. So
Perfect.
it will bring you out to 2023 if it's approved.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Any member of the board object to treating this as a consent item? No. Is anybody in the public here for this, Scott?
I don't see any hands up, Brad.
Okay, then can I have a motion on this item for 266 College Street?
Sure, I'll do it again. I move on 20-0037 CAMA 266 College Street, that we grant the approval for time extension, adopt staff findings and conditions.
Second on this one? Caitlin, thank you. Any discussion? No. Okay, then all in favor? Opposed? Okay, this one carries too.
Thank you.
4 consent items. We've got 2 down, 2 to go. Next item is 31 North Prospect Street. That's change of use for duplex, removing boarding house. I see the applicant is here. Kesha, this is on consent agenda, recommended for approval. Are you okay with the staff's recommendations on this one?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Anybody on the board object to treating this as consent? And again, I'll ask if there's anybody in the public. Scott?
No hands are raised, Brad.
Okay. Another motion.
I can do this one.
Okay.
So on 21-0520 CA/CU, I move that we approve the application and adopt staff findings.
Second on this. Caitlin, okay. Any discussion? No. Okay, all in favor of this? Yep. Opposed? So this carries. You're all set, Kesha.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one more consent agenda item. That's 194 South Champlain Street. Requesting a short-term rental, bed and breakfast. Is the applicant here for that one?
Yes, Cheri Campbell.
Okay. Hello, Cheri. This is recommended for consent, and so the staff has recommended some conditions of approval. Have you seen those, Cheri?
I have.
Are you okay with those?
I am.
Okay. Is the board okay with treating this one as consent? No objections. Okay. Again, anybody in the public for this?
No hands are raised.
Okay. Then how about a motion on 194 South Champlain?
I'll make a motion. On 21-0491 CU, I move that we adopt staff recommendations and approve the application for the short-term rental.
Second? Keenan, thank you. Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we're all set, Cheri.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I guess the next 2 will probably take a little longer than that. Next thing is 14 Strong Street. This is addition over a single-story portion of a home, replace windows, and install a door. I see Missa is here, and I see one of the neighbors are here.
Yeah, for swearing in, Brad, I'm enabling both of them.
Okay, is there anybody else who wants to speak on this besides Missa and Alan? No, okay, so Missa and Alan, I swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Yes, I do.
Okay. So Missa, can you maybe explain the project and help us understand this, what is relevant about the property line. And I think the two issues that were raised had to do with property line and tree removal.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, as you can see, I'm planning an addition over the first level of my home to create another bedroom. In the uncovering of land issues with the project, I discovered that the deed has two dimensions in its written form, where it states that the property line, my western property line, is 22 feet from the eastern face of 8 Strong Street and 75 feet more or less from along Strong Street to Drew Street. So if you put those two dimensions on a site plan, they're actually in conflict. One is 1 foot outside of my home. It gives me a 1 foot from the western face of my home, and the other dimension puts it within my home. So there's a dispute between myself and my neighbor about where that property line actually exists. So I designed the project so that way that we're not encroaching on that disputed property line. It is actually to the east of that property line to resolve the issues of the dispute of the property line for this particular project. The tree removal, we have no intention of removing any trees on the property. So that's my answer to that.
Okay. Any questions from the board for Missa so far on this? No. And maybe it may be helpful at this point to have the neighbor let us know what, because it does sound from what Mrs. presentation that they are staying away from the two issues that were raised, but maybe we're misunderstanding it. Alan, do you want to clarify this?
Yes, thank you very much. So Missa did modify her plans by moving back the western edge of the addition from her wall, which puts it on completely on her property, which is agreed to by us. However, she put a door and a flat membrane roof over that section. And on the current existing plans, she intends to use it as a deck. And the staff report, the condition, the first one, I believe, in addition to standard conditions, says you have to remove that door and make it into a window. And I don't know if it says it specifically, but we would prefer that there not be a flat membrane for somebody to put a deck onto or go out onto and treat it as a deck. So that is the issue. Basically, we're fine with them doing an addition. We think some of those trees are going to be cut back, even if they do it as she has modified it, if she didn't do a deck. If you look at the photos, both her photo from her photograph exhibit, as well as the exhibit to my second comments, you can see a photograph where the trees are overhanging that lower first floor section, and they're going to be cut back even if she sets back 3 or 4 feet. If she were to put a deck there, then she would cut them back so severely she wouldn't need to remove them, they would die. So we have no problem with her doing everything that she wants to do, so long as she doesn't build over our property, which is the deck that is currently proposed on her revised drawing.
Okay. I have one question for you on those trees, Alan. It looks like the tree is pretty close to their house, and obviously the branches hang over their house.
Correct.
So some trimming of those branches do you see that as acceptable?
So if the trimming were to allow for a house that is 3 or 4 feet, I believe she has 5 feet in from that wall, I don't think that that would kill the tree.
Yeah.
We're talking about a tree. There's in fact about 4 or 5 tall, skinny, not very many branches trees that form up the most of it.
Yeah.
So I don't have a tree problem as long as she's not encroaching into that area between where she set it back and where the wall is.
So question, anybody on the board have any questions for Alan on this? Then I guess I'll go back, Missa. The staff report did request to not have that deck be a deck at this point.
Correct. Yep. And that's fine. The drawings will be revised to show that as a window and membrane roof in that location. As far as the trees are concerned, my insurance company, homeowners insurance company, has actually brought up those trees as an issue for my homeowner's insurance because of their proximity to my house. I do not intend to. I actually quite enjoy the privacy of those trees. However, they will the branches that are overhanging our property will need to have to be trimmed back.
It would seem the house would benefit from that.
Yes, the house would also benefit from that in terms of dry rot and
so on the as regards to the deck, is your intention still to do it as a membrane roofing in that area?
Correct.
Okay, questions for Missa at this point? No. And I'm just going to go back to Alan for a second. I mean, Alan, you mentioned about the membrane roof. Membrane roofs are a legitimate roof in this condition. So I think that may be consistent with the request for the changes that the staff put together.
That is true, and really it's simply a matter of, for example, at the Design Advisory Board, and these haven't been revised from the Design Advisory Board, but she said she was going to keep a membrane roof and keep the door there and just do a Juliet balcony. And my thought was that that's just inviting a zoning violation. That, it's only a matter of time before somebody starts, spending time on that area. A membrane roof would make that more difficult, but are more easy to do. And so that's why we would rather that it not be there. But I don't think that there's anything in the zoning ordinance that would prohibit a membrane roof from being there. So.
Okay. Great. Anything you want to add at this point, Missa?
Nope.
Okay. This isn't a lot longer than the consent agenda item. I feel like we should be getting more detail here, but maybe this is it. Unless there's anything else from the board, we will close this item. Okay, and we will probably deliberate at the end of the meeting tonight. We have a sketch plan to go over next. So
the hope. That'd be the hope.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Missa and Alan.
Great.
Hello, Jeff. So the next item we have on our agenda is sketch plan from Lake Champlain Transportation, which is 2-14 King Street, and is the applicant here?
Yeah, we have a few folks here.
Okay. This is a question for staff on this as we're getting started here. It's an unusual situation, and we obviously don't have a staff report yet on this.
There's a staff oh my God.
What?
That's funny. There's a staff report. I don't see it on the packet.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, good thing it's just sketch plan.
Yeah, well, I know we've had
rush to get it done.
It's an unusual location, and so the requirements according to CDO are not typical. So I was going to ask if the staff would at least give it a little bit of an overview of the relevant point of view for the CDO at this location.
That is very interesting that the staff report isn't there. That said, the only item in need of additional attention, I'll say, is the 50-foot setback from the water's edge. So this is on public trust land. So the city's zoning code requires 50-foot wide from the water's edge, clear public passage. And as you can see in the sketch plans, there's patio area and planters, and I think even some building within that 50-foot setback. So there is allowed provision for encroachment, like seating areas and planters and landscaping. But there's a balance in there as to how much is permissible while continuing to allow open and consistent public access. Beyond that, the restaurant is fine. It's in the flood zone. They are proposing to elevate it to, I believe it's 104 feet above sea level, which is 2 feet above base flood elevation. There's no parking requirement. They do have a fair bit of parking, and I raised a question as to whether or not it exceeded the parking maximum limitation.
But if there's no parking requirement, how do you exceed the maximum?
That's a good question, Brad. Even though the minimums are gone, see, Mary likes that. Even though the minimum's gone, the maximum was retained. And the maximum is 125% of what would be required in the shared use district. So there is a maximum.
That's based on seats.
It's based on, it would be handy if I had the staff report here to look at. I think restaurants are based on seating capacity, but I'd have to confirm that. It's a little bit different than the straightforward per square foot.
Okay. Well, thank you. I did want a little background on that. So I see the applicant, there's 4 people here. And I don't know who's presenting, and if whoever does, could you introduce yourselves as you go? And it's yours. And maybe we can get something up, share a screen here too, Scott.
Sure. So Steve and Jay, or whomever else, you guys are enabled to talk. Do you want to share your screens, or shall I drive that?
This is Steve Roy at Weeman Lanphier Architects. I'm able to share my screen if that's okay.
All right, let me make that possible for you, Steve. Okay, you should be able to do it now, Steve.
You're muted, Steve.
Hold on just a second here. Okay, does that show up for everybody?
It does.
Okay, excellent. I'm sorry, I don't have the staff notes. I think Scott touched on a few of the items. I think what and I assume that everybody has in hand a set of revised drawings that were delivered on the 29th of December. Those were in response to some technical review comments and some previous meetings.
Yeah, those were posted, Steve, in the packet.
Okay. Tonight's, the presentation is really an effort to respond to the items that have been discussed. And as Scott mentioned, the biggest challenge for us has been the pedestrian access requirements along the lake itself. What we're trying to present this evening is what we feel is the best balance that can be achieved by Lake Champlain transportation. Within a cover letter that was distributed with the drawings, there was 4 key items that we wanted to convey. One is that this is a Maritime Transportation Security Act location because it is a transportation and ferry system. I don't know the specific details as Lake Champlain is required to keep those confidential. But I do know that they have requirements that are federally mandated that require, you know, certain conditions to be achieved. So they're working to maintain that security along some defined level. The next item was on the south side of the proposed project is the only deep water access area. If there's a problem with any of the ferries, that area really needs to be made available to the transportation company so that they can service the ferries. Third item was that the marina and support needs support and access along the west side. So actually this revised version has the southern access extending all the way to the west. That allows them to pull any of the docks, the marina docks that are there during the summertime. That allows a staging place for that to happen. The fourth item, which is probably the least of my personal concerns, but there is, with the use of a restaurant, there is some requirements for liquor control. And within that, the ability to, you know, define certain areas and have those blocked off from all public access. So trying to balance kind of a combination of those 4 elements in total. The plan that you see on the screen shows the entire property, which has several buildings on it. The ones that are shown in red are buildings that would be removed. The one outline that is green and hatched is what the new building would be.
Steve, just a question. This ferry does not show on this plan. Is that some reason for that?
No, only that it's in the lake and not.
Well, the access would be there, wouldn't it, for the cars? That's still going to be there, right?
Yes. So there's a few different access ramps on the property. The existing location remains, as well as the lake access, which is just south of the smallest building that gets removed. So there's a few different connection points that will remain. There's also an access ramp that is fairly new along the northwest corner of the property. That one will remain in place, but I think will be not used to a great extent.
Thank you.
Also, within part of the operation, there's a barge, kind of a barge slip that happens on the north portion. That does still remain used they use that area as an access point for loading the barges. So that also remains part of the required access. I can skip on to the next page, which is a little bit closer up view of the proposed plan. Everything you can see that to a lighter extent, there are the existing buildings that will be removed. Those outlines are still shown. We've extended existing parking areas to cover where those buildings will be removed. And we're showing, you know, essentially handicap parking spaces that would be used for the restaurant, and then additional spaces that have been added as a result of those buildings being lost. A couple of the key points are that the building's main entrance will be this south side where we have a sidewalk leading from the parking. They'll go by a bicycle rack area, and then underneath the covered space into the building. From that'd be considered kind of the main entrance. It's where the largest building sign will be located, and provides the greatest visibility from vehicular driving access point, which would be coming from the south. Once inside, there's 80 seats that are planned for the inside of the restaurant. Being a great location on the lake for public access, there is a significant amount of seating that will be placed on patios to the south and primarily the west of the building. So the overall capacity is probably a few hundred people, even though just 80 more in the wintertime. What we've shown here is a clump of 6 trees on the south side. That'll help to provide some shaded areas, with the thought that people could casually gather underneath those trees as well. It also helps to separate some of the Lake Champlain's transportation company buildings and parking a little bit away from the visitor's experience. One of the things that has changed a bit since previous meetings with the TRC and Scott, this southern access, we've removed parking from the southeast corner of the restaurant, but we have retained access for Lake Champlain transportation along that south edge. So that would be a gravel access point, pretty much identical to what is there today. It would allow vehicles to travel down that path. If they need a crane, they can maneuver a crane down that path as well. All of what's defined as a hatch here would be outside pavers or maybe stamped concrete. We haven't gotten down to the final details of that yet. But that would be where all the seating would be for outside use. We do have a few steps down to a lower lawn area. The thought is that all the patio space would be at the same level of the restaurant with minimal grading to make it all accessible, with stairs and an access ramp to a lower, closer to existing grade lawn space on the west. Another change since our last meetings, on the north side of the project, we have an access road that can connect to the parking lot. The thought is that this space can serve 2 functions pretty well. One being that Lake Champlain Transportation can bring vehicles down to that area so that they can load the barge. For instance, they load fireworks onto the barge. So knowing that they'd have that access remaining, that would be adequate. But at the same time, we've proposed that the northern area be allowed to have public in a fairly unrestrained way. The reason for the north being the preferred location for that is the deep ferry access requirements on the south and security access points on the south and west. But also the north provides a good access point for a future connection to the Eco Center. And we see the pedestrian side of being more from the north, especially with that future connection. So that would allow that pedestrian to go from the Eco Center to travel onto property down a paved or concrete path to have unobstructed views to the lake on the north and west. So we think the north side is a reasonable amount of space to allow more unfettered public access while still providing the necessary access for Lake Champlain transportation. A little bit more security concerns exist on the west and south. So that's what we're hoping can create a comfortable balance for the city. We do think that, that pedestrian access alignment with Echo could line up fairly well with the sidewalk paths that we're creating. So perhaps there's future potential down the south, but we feel that what we're presenting is really what needs to happen. I can flip through any of the 3-dimensional renderings if that's appropriate. Otherwise, we can take questions on the site plan.
I have a question. Can you zoom in a little bit? So it does look like on the north side, you do have it labeled for the 50-foot, but it doesn't appear to be labeled on the rest of it. So I just wanted to understand that. And then I understand this somewhat, some of the security concerns, but to me, that doesn't seem like an argument for why you can put the restaurant in the pedestrian easement. So I would like to hear a little bit more from you where it looks like on this that we've got a pretty significant portion of this building going into that 50-foot setback.
Yeah, and the reason for that on the north side, and I can point you to this area here, we have the existing building footprint that already encroaches on that 50-foot setback. So what we're doing is placing the restaurant within that footprint, but still, so that by the zoning code allows us to do that. So we're not making that condition worse, and we're only improving it by a small margin.
Sorry, can you clarify that? It looks like your building goes substantially beyond the existing footprint.
Let me try to mark. I don't know if I can mark that up actually. Are you able to see my mouse?
Yeah, I can see the gray underline of the existing building, and it looks
so
to me
that gray underline follows this line here, and then down and through the center of the new restaurant, and then back up.
Okay.
So the area that is hatched and new restaurant essentially comes within a foot or two of the existing footprint that is there today.
you're talking about just to the north.
Just to the north, correct.
So you're ignoring the portion of the building that goes into the 50-foot easement to the west.
Well, the building actually is set back the 50 feet from this west edge.
Okay.
I do see that Jay has modified where that 50-foot area is, but the building itself is out of it. The only thing that would be within the 50-foot is the planters, the low walls, and the patio space, which I believe are all allowed.
But you're raising grade within that 50-foot area.
That is correct, yes.
And that's, I guess, that's allowed?
Well, that's what I was getting at earlier, Brad. There's provision for encroachment, and it includes things like planters and landscaping, hardscaping, but it can't prohibit free and open public access. And what we had pointed out, we being staff at TRC, was gee, you can walk across the patio, but the way the walls are construed, it seems pretty cut off from public access. I mean, it's basically seating area for the restaurant.
And the walls really separated out so the public can walk along the proposed lawn. But that's it.
I don't even see that they can do that based on the landscaping. You would have to go through not through the restaurant, the building itself, but I would imagine through some type of outside queuing, maitre d' situation, and enter through the property and sort of having the public walk through tables, and you feel like you're in a restaurant. You don't feel like you have access to that.
Correct. The intent here is that the lawn area and observation area that are on the north side would be basically unfettered public access. The south side would not have, we would want to discourage access on the south side due to the ferry operation issues. And then the proposed lawn and patio space is essentially public access, but by way of a restaurant.
but by way of a restaurant. So there would be no administration at all of trying to separate customers from non-customers in that area.
I guess to get that back to that, to get onto the patio, you would essentially enter the restaurant area to do that.
Does that mean that it wouldn't be accessible outside of business hours as well?
Yes, and I think outside of the business hours, it becomes more of a marina security concern for Lake Champlain transportation.
And Steve, can you explain how far off the lakefront is the west face of the building? Is that 50 feet, or where's the 50-foot come in?
It is, yeah, it's within a few feet of 50 feet.
The building or the overhang?
The overhang.
The overhang, okay.
Steve, this is Jeff Hand. I know this is not your area of expertise, but I think you can gather from the questions you've heard, we're going to need a little more information on the justification for why it's okay to put a restaurant that makes money within the 50-foot easement right of way with no restrictions related to security for that particular use, but exclude members of the public based on security concerns. So I'm not sure how your team wants to address that, but I'll certainly be looking for some more detailed information legally on what the basis is for excluding members of the public from that area. I can understand it perhaps to the south where you're showing sort of active ferry operations. The argument for excluding to the west feels pretty weak to me based on what you're proposing.
I would add to that, Jeff, too, because they're kind of at the bottom of what's showing here. You have existing lawn that you're changing into a members only area that seems directly in front of that deep water access. That again, it's members are allowed, but not the public, and how that fits in with the security concerns as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna just jump in and share those concerns as well. It's not a public patio, right? I mean, I think we can all agree on that. And we want to see, utilization of these underused spaces. In good times, we know how popular this can be and we know how much it adds to the overall waterfront experience. But I think you can't take this public trust doctrine lightly. That's my sketch. That's my sort of comment on this.
And I've got just a couple of other comments on public access or questions. Can you tell me the proposed future path, why that's proposed future? Why isn't that not included as part of the proposed plan?
Where are you looking, by the way?
To the north.
Yep. This proposed
Oh,
future path.
yeah. Okay.
There have been conversations with the Echo.
Okay.
But that is not Lake Champlain Transportation's property to deal with. So.
Okay. And I think my understanding is the bike path is being rerouted down here on the east side of this property. It doesn't look like there's any provision for access from the bike path to this facility. Can you just address that?
I may defer to Jay Bierman for that one, civil engineer.
Jeff, the railroad might be in the way.
The stuff along the east property line, along the railroad and the bike path, those are still in ongoing discussions between Lake Champlain Transportation and the city and the other powers that be. We're trying to plan to some extent to be flexible for whatever develops over there, but we're not in a position to be able to offer anything or promise anything over on that side while those negotiations are ongoing. Our primary connection that we're aiming to offer is this opening up to the north via Echo to the main waterfront park. And the best means for that with what we know is what we're showing here.
Okay. I'm just a little concerned that if you don't plan for it, you may have activity on bike or by foot coming from the bike path across your property to get to the large facility you're building. It looks like a great building, and I suspect it'll be a strong draw, but I'd want to see a little more thought put into how you manage that. And I guess I've got the same question to the south. There's another large restaurant just south of you. I could imagine there being some traffic between that and this facility. Can't really see in the site plans what you're proposing for pedestrian access sort of back down towards the ferry docks and or across to the existing restaurants in this area.
Yeah, I'd still like to discourage that connection though, because we have, again, these ferry operations in between. We'd like to discourage pedestrian or public direct connections between the two buildings. Of course, we can't do that.
I think I want to just, Jerry, it's hard for us to review this in a piecemeal fashion. This site goes to the bike path, it goes to the other building, and we don't really have a plan that puts all this in context. And so when you come back, I think we're going to want to see that. I mean, that's stuff that Jeff is talking about, is what happens to the vehicle traffic coming in that goes to the ferry, pedestrians that are crossing the ferry. How do you control cars coming in that are going through the gatehouse or whatever it is for the ferry area? All that stuff really should be part of this presentation.
And Jay, I'm very sympathetic to that concern about access across the ferry loading zone, and I think you're wise to try to address it. I would expect addressing that would likely include providing better access from another point, like the bike path. So, you know, something to consider when you come back.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
One other concern, I guess, question I have, especially if we're talking about the parking being potentially over the maximum, is it feels like putting this building and patio into the setback is kind of purposely designed so that you can add additional parking for the entire property. And so it's not like you don't have other space to put a building and patio of this size. You do have the space. So that's where I think it's hard to look at this with a positive light on that. I definitely would love to see this development, but I really don't see that strong of a reasoning for going that far into the setback.
So briefly, Caitlin, just on the parking thing. So, and Brad too. So cafes are per seating. This is big enough to be a restaurant. So it is based on square footage. So the upper limit on surface parking for this is 20. And so as you can see, there's a lot more than 20 spaces here. But I don't know what spaces are for the restaurant versus the ferry operation, and requested some detail on that.
That would be helpful, Steve or Jay, to see how the parking gets allocated. And I think Caitlin's comment seems on point too, that you're pushing it way west into the access area, and it may not be necessary to go that far west.
Understood. We're trying to balance the reality that there is a need for parking down there, even though the restaurant won't necessarily take up that much. It's easy enough to block off 20, put in the landscaping that Scott had in his staff notes to supplement the parking, but the other ongoing operations down on this property require a lot of parking. So we're trying to maximize that also.
And I guess that was Scott's comment, is that it would be helpful to see what's generating the parking so we can better understand that.
Right.
I have two comments. One would be wanting to understand how private events would be handled. I see that there's an outdoor event room, a proposed patio in front of that outdoor event room. I can extrapolate and think of a variety of different types of private events that may want to purchase that area for a time for their event. How does that factor in with public access? wanting to just understand, the operations behind that. And then also my comment is with the 3D renderings themselves. They paint a rather rosy and unrealistic picture of what the site around the building actually looks like. I know Brad asked about what does a ferry look like. Well, you said that's the water, but it also makes it look like this exists on an island to some extent, which it doesn't. And fairly unrealistic looking south and looking north. So I think it would be helpful to kind of see this in the context of how it would actually exist. And I do find that the vessels that would be around it would be important to see that to scale.
Okay, that can be adjusted.
I am curious, Steve, about one other thing that was in the floor plan of the building. There were stairways, and is there an upper level on this or something?
It is just I think it's 800 square feet. It is a small mezzanine for storage.
Oh, okay. Just curious.
Yep.
I think that those a lot of the comments have to do with the public right of way and understanding this project in context of the area. Part of which is outside of your control, but part of it is within your control. So more information.
Okay.
Other comments from the board? We do have these very nice renderings. And I think I agree with Springer that I was trying to follow the renderings and relate it to what's there today and realize that part of the area that's been fixed up in the renderings is in city property. So I'm sort of assuming that that's not happening. Since I don't imagine that part of your project is to renovate city land north of this project.
Yeah, I mean, the northeast view doesn't show spot on the dock really the way it exists. And I think it's just, to have one sailboat where, two large ferries come and go. It just doesn't, I'd like to see the context.
Okay.
And then one thing that we usually hit on that I don't see here, at least in the renderings, are trash receptacles, and I see deliveries.
Yeah, that was part of the staff notes as well. We have had conversations with trying to locate a combined trash location for both the restaurant and for LCT's remaining buildings, so as not to have several within the same property. That can be defined better in the next round.
Steve, on the schematic floor plan with the site, there's this heavy dashed blue line that goes around. Is that the 50-foot setback?
Yes, I suspect it is. I'll flip to that plan.
Okay.
Yes, that is the 50-foot from the edge, water's edge.
Yeah, right. So that does put it in perspective as to where the public access area is, even if there is some, flexibility on that south side for ferry related activities. The rest of it really seems to be maybe better access for the public.
Yeah, and can I also just ask on that rendering, it's showing marina docks both to the west and to the south.
Yes.
Are those existing?
Those are there today. Yes, they're there this summer.
Okay. So that sort of raises my more concern about the security justification. Particularly, you're showing marina docks in the area you've suggested you need to maintain access for deep water work to the south.
Yeah, so there's
confusing.
Yeah, and if Russell wants to speak to this, that might be a good time, but they have concerns and ongoing issues with public getting too close to the marina, jumping the wall, getting onto people's boats. So by having the restaurant on the western side, that allows for off hours to be no people there, for mischief to happen at night. So by allowing the public access on the north side, that kind of takes away that issue. There's no close access to the marina docks from the north side. The south side, if they do have, if it is in conflict with the marina docks and they have a vessel that needs maintenance, then they will have to remove the docks, which is another reason to have that southern access point so that they can remove those docks and then work on the ferry.
So did I misunderstand?
I can give a little bit of an
I just wanted to understand
ahead.
that you're saying that having the restricted public access provides more security for the docks. So, did I misunderstand that?
Hi, this is Russell. Can I give a little explanation?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. They're there. We utilize those.
Your audio is not working very well.
Okay. I don't know.
Try it again.
Can you hear?
No.
No.
We're not hearing anything, Russell.
Okay. I believe I'm unmuted. Can you hear anything at all?
Yeah, we can hear you. And then when you start speaking, it just sort of disappear. Try it again.
Okay. I'll move a little closer. How's that?
Okay.
Good.
Okay. So the facility is used the entire year.
We're only hearing about, I don't know, 10% of what you're saying, Russell. You're just breaking up or something.
I wonder if you're feeding back, Russell.
I don't know. Not sure. Let me see if I can switch something here.
Whatever you're doing right now works fine.
Yeah,
Okay, I moved back a little bit. Does that help?
it helps right now.
Okay. Facility is only used a portion. The ferry boats. So we have what's called it's a facility security plan. We're reviewed and we're regulated by the Department of Homeland Security, and there is a MARSEC facility, which Marine Security Act. It's not something that we can turn on and turn off. It's an evaluation, and it's a review that is approved through the government. Turn it off for the summer months and turn it back on for the winter months. So the facility security plan is in place entirely throughout the year. So there are restricted areas and restricted in certain places that we have to know who's there. We have to regulate those access. I can't give you a lot of information. It's just not something I'm authorized to do. But anyways, so the ferry boats are utilized on the south side. It's our deep water access. If we need to access a boat, if I have to pull engines out, transmissions out, any of the service work that requires access, that's the location that we would do that. The western side is the same case. We utilize that in the wintertime. I'm doing service work. I'm loading materials on it. That's part of the access. We also have security that's needed for the marine on their boats. We have a lot of access that we're concerned with.
I don't think it's working.
Yep. We've had public people boarding people's boat while they're sleeping at night. Security is an issue that we're concerned with.
So Russell, we're hearing about half of what you're saying here. It would be helpful when in the next round of presentations to understand if there's anything you're doing that's restricting public access because of those kinds of issues, to let us know. Because right now we just look at it and say, gee, there should be better public access in that 50-foot buffer on the west side. We understand the south side issues. But if there's some reason that we shouldn't be having that 50-foot buffer on the west side, a better explanation would be helpful.
I can tell you that restrictions on the
We can't hear half of what you're saying, Russell. I'm sorry. So,
just adding, Brad, to your point, I think it's also important for us to understand the difference between the security concerns for where it falls under, you know, for the ferry boats and the deep water access, and how that's different from security for a marina and, you know, the money making operation of that. And there might be some limitations on public access that make sense for one and not the other.
And I will point out for the applicant that really the purpose of sketch plan is for you to understand what the issues are and the concerns from the board. And I think that those are becoming fairly clear at this point in terms of the next round of presentations, some of the issues that we'd like to see more information on or changes to the plan.
And when it comes to securing private vessels, you know, I'd like to understand how that differs from the security needs of boats on the city docks and the King Street dock and in front of Echo. I mean, they're all open to the public all the time, minus some signage. This would be the only secure facility right here in this area.
Problems exist on the marina docks, at all docks, the publicly accessed and the private ones.
Oh, I'm a boater. I understand.
And I didn't understand what you meant.
You're saying that you're putting in specific security, which is going to limit right of access because of private vessels, when the right of access is not taken away from private vessel, you know, where private vessels are parked on the remainder of the waterfront in this area. So
I'm just saying that our marina and access to our docks, that is a private dock that people pay for, is a security concern that we have.
Okay, we understand that. And I guess what you're hearing from us is we don't hear that trumps the 50-foot public access issue. So that just needs a better explanation in the next presentation.
We spent a lot of time talking about our questions and concerns, and I guess I just want to end by saying, and I think AJ said this, it would be great to see this area of the waterfront, you know, more activated, and I appreciate that you're looking at ways to provide some public access. We'd obviously like to see a little more, but it looks like an exciting project, and hopefully there are ways to address this, you know, a number of those concerns and move forward. But thank you for your time and thought thus far on this.
Well said, Jeff.
Thank you. I think it would be a fantastic project in addition to Burlington's waterfront. You know, I'm a little concerned with being able to balance, you know, a private property owner's rights and concerns with this access on all sides of essentially what is a man-made peninsula. But we can review it further.
It's the nature of Burlington's waterfront. But I mean, I agree with what Jeff said, that it would be great to see some activity down here, and it could be a very nice project. Any other comments from the board at this point? Or Steve or crew, do you have any other questions for us at this point?
In examining the 50-foot setback, does the board see any limit to the width of that setback allowed? In other words, if the public were allowed access for the final 10 feet up against the water, or say 10 feet away from the water, do you see any difference in that sense?
I guess we'd have to try to understand what the requirements are. There's some specific doctrine as to what's governing this, and I guess we'd have to try to understand that in context.
It's a 50-foot setback, Brad. 50 feet from the water's edge.
Pretty simple.
Scott, you were saying though there are some provisions for encroachments to that 50 feet, correct?
Right. Says encroachments allowed such as walkways, planters, and benches, so long as pedestrian circulation isn't impaired.
Okay.
But
So-
if, I guess my question, and maybe you're trying to answer it and I'm not quite getting it, but if pedestrians are able to flow through somewhere within that 50 feet, does it have to be the entire 50 feet? If there's a way to provide adequate security on that west side that separates the water's edge from the public, does that suffice?
Some of that may be a legal question, Steve. You know, I don't know that we can answer that definitively for you right now. I think what Brad was saying is it would be nice to see some more thought put into how to better balance the concerns you're trying to address. Some of those may be answered by, you know, the Maritime Safety Act that you guys have cited. It would be better, it'd be good to understand what that is a little more to the extent you can share details. And I could imagine there's a rational point of agreement where you're providing access within reason, and the encroachments that come into that 50 feet are of the type that are, you know, that Scott listed. Or there's another legal justification for, you know, accepting that. But I'm not convinced yet that the latter is a good argument.
And I guess I'll throw out too that if you say, well, maybe they don't get the full, maybe part of the planters and other things are encroaching in that 50 feet, but you still want to have access, some access that goes through there. And if you look on the south side with those trees in there, and assuming that the ferry operations area is really a restricted area, that there really isn't any public access on the south side of that building at all, really. You'd have to, and even getting around from the north side to the west side, it's pretty difficult to get around there because you've got the that existing access ramp that I think is almost like a moat.
Yeah, it's a concrete wall. Yep.
So it's just to think about circulation around the site. That if we're being asked to that part of that 50-foot buffer is not necessarily 100% public access because it's part of the restaurant. Just think about the circulation around the site. That really, I think my view would be it has to be maintained. Somebody should be able to walk around there.
Yep. And
right now it looks difficult.
I think what would be helpful for me, and I don't know if this is for the applicant or for the city, is a bit of a history lesson and understanding around the approvals for spot on the dock. And just, you know, I'm looking at the satellite view of the two locations. You know, both sort of, you know, what we're calling man-made peninsulas look very similar. You know, restaurant seating going up to the edge. No ability to really walk around the building. There seems to be a lot of similarities with the spot on the dock already existing and being there, and you know, so I think an understanding of how spot on the dock got to the way that it was, how it was approved, might be helpful in the review of this proposed dock ponds.
I'm not sure that they're comparable. Spot on the dock dates back at least into the 90s. And I don't know what the city had for an approval process back then. I'm sure the 50 feet didn't exist at that point.
The spot on the dock was built back in the 60s.
I was gonna say it's further back than that, as breakwaters. I was gonna say since the dawn of time.
Yeah, it was built around 1960. This 50-foot buffer, this right of way, is something that was adopted, my understanding, in 2016. That it was voted on, and LCT was unaware at that point in time.
No, it wasn't 2016. It at least showed up in 2008 in the current zoning code, but I'd be willing to bet it was in the 94 code as well.
And just to be clear, it's based on a more fundamental legal principle, public trust principle. So it's not just a zoning issue.
So Brad, I see at least one hand up. If you want to transition to public comment.
Oh, there are public. Okay. Who is here on the public?
Oh, I see A. Martin, so I'll allow A. Martin to speak, and I see a phone as well.
Okay. A. Martin, can you introduce yourselves and give your address? And you're muted right now. Are you trying to unmute?
I've asked him or her to unmute.
It's probably, I'm almost certain it's Andrew Martin. He's part of the project as well for Negley and Chase Construction.
Oh.
Can we transition to the phone then, Brad?
Who is on the phone?
Let's see, who's on the phone?
It's Sharon Busher.
Sharon?
Busher, there we go.
So thank you for letting me weigh in. Although I must admit, I found Zoom very helpful, but with this type of sketch plan review, I miss being able to be there and a big screen and be able to really look at all these details. I want to just focus on the 50-foot buffer that was put in place, and I agree with Scott. I think it was either late 80s or early 90s when the community, when we went and got the settled the waterfront issues and zoning issues, and part of the agreement was that people would always, everybody would have access to see the water's edge and to see the lake. And so I find that really important. And the reason I wanted to speak to this was that I understand our zoning, which allows someone who is tearing down a structure to rebuild in that original footprint. But I think that these structures were put in place before we had the ruling with the public trust doctrine. And now there's an opportunity to really guarantee that buffer. And I think we need to look at that very carefully as you review this proposal. And since it's sketch plan review, I think these are the times where you raise some concerns and some desire to have really that buffer really protected and to have that incorporated into something that works and makes your spot, your restaurant, your activities more desirable because of that very buffer. So I just wanted to speak to the importance of this. The community, which a lot of those people no longer live here, but I think the same dedication to who we are in Burlington and who we are in Vermont, and the value of the lake and the value of the vista and the right for everyone to have access to it. So thank you.
Thanks, Mom. I think that was it on the public side, Scott.
I don't see any more hands, Brad.
I think, I think we've made sort of fairly consistent comments. Unless any of the boards members have anything else to add. Steve and crew, it is a nice looking project, and it just sounds like with some clarification and a little bit of looking at certain things, it looks good.
Well, thank you all for your comments.
Okay, thank you. That is the last item on our agenda. Yes. So we will adjourn the hearing, the meeting, and we have one item to